Professor Johann Coetzee is a highly accomplished academic practitioner and co-founder of Henley Air, which he established alongside his son in 1995. From its early beginnings, the organization has grown into a leading aviation group reflecting his vision and leadership. He holds multiple advanced degrees across public administration, sociology, industrial and organizational psychology, including 3 doctoral qualifications. His distinguished career spans academia, consulting, and industry, with professional appointments at institutions such as the Northwest University, the University of the Free State, and the Da Vinci Institute. A specialist in organizational psychology, executive wellness, ethics, and aviation psychology, Professor Coetzee has spent decades working as a consulting psychologist and human development expert, supporting leaders and organizations in complex and high-performing environments. He is a fellow at the Da Vinci Institute, the Institute of Management Consultants, and the Institute of People Management, and is a published author on organizational dynamics and corporate culture. An aviation enthusiast with a passion for helicopter flying, he brings a unique blend of academic insight and practical experience to the field. An honor and a privilege, Professor Coetzee.
I promise you a non-academic theoretical presentation. I'd like to share a few stories with you. I'd like to start, as Andre did, displaying my own vulnerability. Reino, het jy daai ding? When you go for your medical checkup as part of your certification to fly, in other words, that you're healthy, and I trust you can read that, then the general practitioner, your doctor, is obliged to fill out this particular document. And the heading is Aviation Mental Screening Questionnaire. And it's a yes-no reply. And I'll just use 1 or 2 of these questions just to illustrate the unsafeness of this process. Question 1, would you please answer it to yourself? Do you have or have you ever had any of the following? During the past 3 months, have you often been bothered by feeling down, depressed, or hopeless? I'm married. During the past 3 months, have you often been bothered by having little interest or pleasure in doing things? I'm inherently lazy. That's a fact. That's why I'll rather try work sometime. During the past 3 months, have you been bothered by having problems falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much that is unrelated to sleep disruption from night flying or transmeridian operations, etc.? Yes. In the past three months, has there been a marked elevation in your mood lasting for more than 1 week? Let's make that daily. If I answered yes or no, is obviously a test of integrity. And as an aviator, the question obviously begs, how honest are you about your own safeness? Because if you are patently honest, you'll be grounded. The next category is about anxiety. I'll just handle 1 or 2. In the past 3 months, have you had an episode of feeling sudden anxiety, fearfulness, or uneasiness? Weekly? Daily? Never? And then alcohol. I won't go into the detail, but I've witnessed people before a display show, an aerobatic event, drink copious bottles of beer and win the event the next day. Andre mentioned it earlier on, and I've said to so many of these guys that I'm perfectly prepared to lose you as a friend, but not as a pilot. Therefore, I will confront you. So my short presentation to you today, dear friends, is an encounter about self-assessment and not about the theory and the literature of safety. We've had it all this morning, and these are certainly advanced technology in terms of teaching education, the pedagogy, if you wish, of the fundamentals. Read the book, pass the exam, and prang. There's a different dimension here, and that is intrinsic. That is integrity. Andre spoke about intellect, IQ, and you can be tested on it and get a rating. Incidentally, 68% of all human beings are average and typical. We're inclined to think that people who can do this and plot a flight and fly the thing, etc., might have better than average intellect. But when last did you have your mental alertness tested, your analytical ability, your deductive reasoning, your situational savvy, your common sense, whilst perhaps even rating way above average on intellect? I chose the term safeness as a conditionality and not safety as a noun. I believe character comes before behavior, and I'll use a simple analogy here. Somebody would drop rubble from their car window onto the street. That's conduct. Somebody who doesn't do that has character which prevents that. And may I suggest that I've never ever seen any training course, educational program on teaching people character, the virtues of humility, and the evidence of submitting to what is right. Never seen that. And I've been in practice for 45 years. And I have had discussions with many people about the what-if syndrome. What if this is you? Let me share a story with you which touched me deeply. I had the privilege of working with and for the late Laurie Kay, and if I can introduce him, he was the guy who flew the jumbo over Ellis Park when we first won the World Cup. And we were testing and assessing and recommending candidates for those days, SA Express and SAA, to be trained down at 43. And we would always meet with a successful candidate so that they can, first of all, meet this wonderful man and pose questions to him. And the one question that he was asked was, how come after 28,000 hours you've never had an incident nor an accident? What is the skill that made you successful? And he said, simple, humility. And an alert student got up and said, sir, but humility is not a skill. And his retort was, make it a skill. I had the privilege of sitting in the jump seat one night on a flight to Sydney, and Laurie was the captain, and we spoke when the P3 took over, and I said to him, what's busy happening here? How is it that you get it right? And he said, I will always respect this thing that I'm flying as slightly ahead of me, and that makes me humble. Where do you test that? I believe, dear friends, that honesty is the purveyor of principle, and that conscience, in fact, will announce it and display it. One of the greatest characteristics of honest pilots is volunteerism. And that's something that I would suggest we all consider. And that is when you expose your vulnerability, when you've made mistakes, and you add up to it. I'll use an example. We were at Virginia at an air show, and it was the first time that the L-39 was going to be displayed. The detail's not important. And Brian Eminis, as he so successfully does, and he's the announcer on the day, was really pumping this event to come. And the first time, this turbine and the whole number. And the captain concerned was sitting under the wing with me at another aircraft, and he ran up as he was introduced. And there are these little chains between the crowd line and the aircraft, and you know what's coming. Down, man down. But he sort of limps up and he flies the thing, comes back. He had torn all the ligaments in his ankle. The Monday morning he volunteered, came to me and he said, what made me do that? Why did I, in fact, cross the boundary of being humble? There is a thing called the egoic state, the hyper-egoic state. And when your ego comes between you and proficiency, you're in trouble. And may I risk to say that if you lie, you die in aviation, particularly to yourself. I fear air shows because that's where we see our friends die. As you may know, we have an Institute for Aviation Psychology at Henley Air, which I've had the pleasure of heading up since its inception. That's not important. But we deploy a psychologist to air shows so that in the event, God forbid, there's an incident, we can do the necessary work. We always attend the briefings beforehand. And Andre and I have shared it on one occasion where all these incredible world-renowned pilots, and they're South Africans, were attending the briefing, and we could say we're hearing as the briefing took place and the questions were posed, that a stratification of ego became visible as a danger indicator. And 20 minutes later, one of our buddies died. Andre made reference to the point, how dare we say, I saw it coming? Because then you're culpable. Why didn't you speak up? Why don't we tell one another, you're in the danger zone? And if it does happen, we're culpable to the extent where we should regret and learn from it. Most pilots of our kind, being the helicopter pilot, does have a deep-lying and probably unknown brag profile within ourselves. And it manifests in pips. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's rank in this world. But where humility should prevail, there's no stature and no stratification. There are no pips. There's only humility. There's only an acknowledgement of what safeness ought to be. Where there's arrogance in aviation, there is danger. And we witness that in people, as I witness it in myself. At a little air show at Wakkerstroom down in Limpopo area, I was a low-hour pilot in a 22, and it was my quest to fly a best friend's son early morning over the bird sanctuary to see the sun come up, etc., and ran out of something and went down, and thank God I'm here to tell the story. But my ego overwhelmed my competence. In fact, my quest to impress stimulated my incompetence. If you have an overestimation of your inflated self, you're in danger zone. May I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that all of us consider an MPI ourselves, a mandatory periodic mental inspection. What the civil aviation expects of us is not enough. You can in fact flaunt that one in a way that it suits you. You can lie yourself into so-called health, universal health. But how about volunteering yourself once a year, sitting down with somebody competent, and you know who's the best in aviation psychologist? Is your friend that you respect and who knows everything about you and still likes you. Go to that individual, because that individual will tell you the way it is. We endorse the notion of incidental revelation. Share it, don't hide it. And if you needed to be grounded and even lose revenue because you're that honest, then by goodness, life is worth living, and not the other way around. I challenge you with a couple of questions. Firstly, do you accept that the cockpit is in fact an ICU? It's an intensive care unit. You're alone in there. Very little references, despite what we've learned from Bruce and other formidable individuals this morning, and Safety 2 and whatever, all relevant, all pertinent. Take it in, internalize it, practice it. But you're very alone in there, particularly when it goes wrong. It's an ICU. And PIC, the pilot in command, is a very vulnerable seat, you know. because we're pretty alone in there in terms of decision making. Let's never ignore the fact that there's a potent degree also of intuition in there. And with hindsight, have we not all said on occasions, if only I knew that or did that? But we do it intuitively, regardless of all the training we've had. Have you not pulled a cyclic right up next to your ear when in fact you should have dropped it? Because instinct overrules logic. May I suggest, ladies and gentlemen, that we all formulate out of this day and similar days, and when we're out at work, our own safety religion. The precepts which we will never compromise on, so that we can always say, or firstly ask the question, as you turn the key, as it were, is this flight truly on? And here I'll cite an example, and then I will end, I promise. We were at an aerobatic situation, display pilot competition out at Safeness many years ago, and a certain friend of ours was lining up, and he was due to win the event, which was a mega thing, international. And he lined up with a Coetzee and S2 and revved up and got clearance to take off, and he didn't. And he turned around and taxied back to the hangar, and of course we all thought that there was something technically wrong with the aircraft, and obviously I stepped up to him and inquired what's wrong. He said, I don't know. He said, but I just felt that it's not okay. This flight is not on. And that night he got the President's Award for safety, and that's for not flying. May I suggest our call is not to fly, but to land on our terms. I've left with you a questionnaire that we use in our institute. May you consider not using it for other people, but perhaps filling it out for yourself, learn something from it, and then share the protocol and land.